What is up, wrestling fans? Thank you so much for joining me here again on the channel today. My name is Nick Nightmare. With me, as always, is the World Heavyweight Champion of Microphones, Blue, the Snowball Microphone, and we are here today to bring you absolutely no news. There is nothing of note to talk about. Everything that has been going on has already been discussed on this channel. We all know about Kairi Sane being awarded a shot at the NXT Women's Championship. We all know everything that's been going on with Raw and SmackDown and the lead up into No Mercy. But what you guys do not know, which is why we are here today, is that September the 16th, 2017 is a very, very special day. Why is that a very special day? Well, that is because 40 years ago, on this day, a very, very beautiful woman named Patricia would give birth to a very handsome and charming and charismatic tiny little baby boy who would be loved and showered upon with so much love and affection because he would be the first in a long line of births in that family to be a male. So I was looked upon very specially, as today is the 40th anniversary of my birth. I am 40 years old today, and that is 4 decades worth of wrestling, as I have been a fan of pro wrestling for as long as I can remember, which is obviously why I have this show right here on YouTube, the newest, fastest rising podcast in all of the wrestling scene on YouTube, the Sledgehammer Wrestling Show. Thank you guys for joining me today. Like I said, there's no news, and it is my birthday, and we are going to take a look back at the year I was born, which was 1977. A few very notable things have happened on that year. Nothing really earth-shattering, no real big, tremendous things happening, because back then, wrestling was just wrestling. There were no real controversial things going on or anything to gain, ratings and stuff like that, because they weren't even focused on TV just yet, but we were on the cusp of wrestling becoming one of the biggest mainstream forms of entertainment in the free world. And as it is today, you would have never imagined where Vince and company would take the sport of pro wrestling today, coming from where we were at just 40 years ago. 40 years it sounds like a long time. It really does. But even when you start looking back at just the progression of wrestling in history over the last 40 years, it hasn't really been that long. And so much happens so quickly that it's almost unfathomable when you see how much has come and gone since then. It's absolutely crazy. But I am all decked out today in my new birthday garb. I got 3 awesome t-shirts and this beautiful brand new updated Ultimate Warrior hat, which we are trying to break in because I'm a rim bent kind of guy, so I'm trying to get this rim nice and bent, but it's pretty brand new. I mean, it's only a few hours old out of the box, so we're trying to get this all in there. And of course, I got my Braun Strowman shirt on because I'm a big, big fan of the Monster Among Men, who will be taking on the Universal Champion Brock Lesnar at the upcoming No Mercy pay-per-view. And coincidentally, Brock Lesnar was born in 1977. Unbelievable. The year I was born brought a lot of talent to the world of pro wrestling, and some other notable births in the year of 1977. Here we go. We got, representing the women's division, Gail Kim, Little Miss Eat Defeat herself, the wife of Chef Robert Irvine and former TNA Knockout and WWE Women's Wrestler champion everywhere she'd gone. Gail Kim, a fantastic talent. Also, 1977, here are some of the lesser known, not known, but lesser popular guys, I guess we could say. We had Lance Hoyt, Shawn Michaels' protege, who was in the WWE for a while. Sylvain Grenier, you guys know his name. He was part of a tag team in the WWE back in the 2000s. Mark Jindrak of Jindrak and O'Hare from WCW, and Jindrak and whoever the hell else they teamed him up with up here in the WWE when he finally came up after the merger. Frankie Kazarian, TNA standout right now, Ring of Honor superstar, and I don't think has ever really made or stepped foot in the WWE as Frankie Kazarian. I could be wrong. Let me know. The comment section is yours to do so, as always. But here are the biggest names on the list. Alberto Del Rio, who we hate talking about, but we have to, bring you the facts. And the fact is, he was born the same year as me, which I'm not happy about. But we'll move along with that. The glorious Bobby Roode was born in the year of 1977. That means Bobby Roode's going to be 40 years old. I didn't fucking know that. 40 years old. And he's just debuting on WWE TV. Former NXT heavyweight champion Bobby Roode. We have Mr. You Can't See Me, John Cena, 1977. He will be turning 40 years old this year. And you can't see him here because I don't like him. And he's going to never be represented anywhere behind this guy because you can't see him on this show ever. And finally, last but not least, we have Brother Nero, Jeff Hardy himself, 1977 kid as well. That is one hell of a list. 1977 brought a lot of wrestling babies that would prove to be some of the best in the business. Debuting in a different way, not as far as being born, but as far as starting their careers in 1977 in the world of professional wrestling. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 big names in the world of pro wrestling who just were starting to get their feet wet. The fabulous Freebird, Michael P.S. Hayes, who is currently on the creative team and has been ruining SmackDown for years with those guys. He debuted in 1977. Hacksaw Jim Duggan started off his tenure in the world of pro wrestling in 77. Bad News Brown. Long before there was Bad News Barrett, we had the bald-headed, take-no-nonsense Bad News Brown, also known as Bad News Allen, depending on where you watched him. And the biggest, probably, of this list, the immortal Hollywood Hulk Hogan. I was more of a Hogan guy than a Warrior guy, but the Warrior merch is always so freaking cool that I love to rock Ultimate Warrior stuff. And we got him hanging out up above right over here, so we don't ever shy away from spotlighting the Ultimate Warrior. But 1977 would be the beginning of the career for Terry Bollea, who we all affectionately know as Hulk Hogan. And man, what more could you say about that? I mean, once you say Hulk Hogan, like, the whole envelope of his career just comes flooding through your brain. If you're a pro wrestling fan, you know every single thing that has happened in the career of Hulk Hogan. And finally on this list, and definitely not least by any means, 1977 brought us the debut of Howard Finkel as the WWE's ring announcer, and he would hold that position for the next 3.5 decades, always bringing the absolute best that I have ever heard. You know, when you were a kid and you were playing with your action figures, when some of you call them dolls, some of you call them figures, whatever you want to call them, that's up to you. But I was playing with my guys, and when I would announce them to the ring, I would always do my very best to sound like Howard Finkel. And it's not easy to do because he's got a very distinct voice, and it is emblazoned in my brain. Like, if you just, even nowadays, like, no matter who's in the ring, I can hear Howard doing the call. Does that make me crazy? Maybe a little bit, but it's just, your brain hears it. You're so used to hearing it. Like I said, 30 years. He was the voice in the ring. It's hard to shake that. Lillian did a great job. She was a great successor to him, and I don't mind Lillian Garcia at all. She was always very good. Even the current crop, JoJo and Mike Rome, they're fine. You know, Tony Chimmel, you know, he was okay. He was the voice of SmackDown when they started to hold that, but there is none better than Howard Finkel, and he started in 1977. Fantastic. Some notable championship reigns from that year. The NWA champion was Harley Race for almost the entirety of the year. And there is no more legit badass in the ring than Harley Race. A true tough guy. In and out of the ring. He would make no bones about protecting the business. He'd be out hanging out with his buddies, taking a few drinks down at the bar, and anybody talks shit, he'd break your arm in two. He'd make you swallow your own teeth and shit them out and then shove them down your throat again. Because that's how Harley Race was. A true, legit badass in the world of pro wrestling. Never really got his due in the WWF. He was made the king, and he had a very notable program with Hacksaw Jim Duggan, which is one of the things I will never forget in the history of wrestling that I have been able to see. But never really crowned the champion or given a real run or just due. He was worth way more than that, but it just goes to show you that even way back then, Vince, if you came in already established, didn't really care too much about you, as he was more worried about putting over his stars, whoever he deemed worthy. For the WWF at the time, because they were Worldwide Wrestling Federation, I never understood that because I always thought worldwide was one word. Correct me if I'm wrong, but be that as it may, the acronym was WWF, and the title that year of 1977 would be flip-flopped back and forth a little bit between the great Bruno Sammartino and superstar Billy Graham, the man of the hour, the man with the power, too sweet to be sour. That wasn't only Dusty's thing. Actually, Dusty probably took it from superstar Billy Graham, as many people did. He was the quintessential heel. He was the birth, really, of the modern flamboyant heel. Gorgeous George made it famous in the past, but the way Billy Graham came across as that flamboyant, arrogant, asshole guy, there was nobody better in wrestling, and it would be followed by so many of the greats. Jesse the Body Ventura, Hulk Hogan, even Ric Flair himself, all took bits and pieces of what Superstar was doing and added it into their repertoire. Superstar Billy Graham, his delivery and his whole shtick was very similar to everything Dusty Rhodes was doing. I don't know who started it, but they both nailed it. They were both fantastic talkers, unbelievable speakers on the mic. Really, Billy Graham gave birth to the modern promo and the way these guys look and speak right now. It was just the beginning, and he was the first one to really stand out and make that what a superstar really is. Hence the name, Superstar Billy Graham. Always one of my favorites, always. As far as the tag team divisions were concerned, the WWF Tag Team Champions for most of that year were Chief Jay Strongbow and Billy White Wolf, until Ken Patera would come along and lock Billy White Wolf in his spinning full Nelson swing and legit injure Billy White Wolf, causing the champions to vacate the titles. And later on that year, in a tournament, they would be won by Mr. Fuji and Professor Toru Tanaka. The biggest thing that I could say, if you want to compare this particular situation to something that would go on today, is this would never happen today. Just based off the gimmick alone. You have Native Americans, you have the Indian team, and then you have the Japanese team, and this was a very common thing back in those days because the world was just a different place. There was a whole different vibe. People didn't get so easily offended. I mean, I feel like the racial tension back then was way higher, but there was more acceptance in the mainstream for things like this because I think back then they understood that they were seeing a show. 90% of the performers that were being billed as a foreign villain were not even foreign. Take case in point, poor Muhammad Hassan. Look at what happened to him. Here's an Italian guy who was booked and made into a character of a wealthy Arab, I don't even know how else to describe him, a villain, asshole, Arab, And then look what happened. They skirt the line of reality too far and it got taken away. And this was like 10, 15 years ago. Imagine if that happened now. They'd be calling for Vince McMahon's head on a platter and they'd want WWE taken off the air completely. You look back at a match like that, or if you had them going one-on-one, the Indians versus the Arabs, I can get in trouble just saying that probably right now. The way I just described it. That's how volatile and how different the world is 40 years ago. If I said that in the 70s, nobody would think the wiser of it. Now I gotta watch what I say. I got to be worried that what I just said offended somebody. That's the way of the world now. So you can't book things like that. You can't have a Native American tag team. We had it in the 80s as well. It's like the temperature wasn't that hot. We had guys like Tatanka. We had the obviously, urban tag teams like Men on a Mission, who were walking out there rapping and portraying that urban street style. That could be viewed as racial stereotyping nowadays, if it's not played off rightly. I know R-Truth really does it, but he does it in a way that it comes off as genuine. Back in the day, it was just being done as a goof, just as a gimmick, as a way to get guys over. I don't understand it. People just can't understand that they're watching a show and that this is made up and this is all not real, everybody. And everybody's too serious nowadays, and there's no room for entertainment. There's no room for controversy. It just needs to be all black and white, plain bread and butter. No flavor to it. Back in the 70s, you had teams like that killing it. And gimmicks like that are what made superstars, what made people important. Because they represented a whole section of an audience. It's what they're trying to do right now with Jinder Mahal. They're making him such a predominant figure, and they're not featuring him in a negative light because they don't want the bad press. Whereas he should be coming out there and tearing America down to its knees. The way that Sergeant Slaughter did it in the 90s. He was a guy that was an American and came in and decided, no, I don't like what America's doing. I'm going to side with Saddam Hussein. One of the craziest angles ever in wrestling. Didn't translate very big in the box office, as WrestleMania that year with him versus Hogan didn't do astronomical numbers. It probably drove some of the fans away because it was too real. And it was Sergeant Slaughter, so many people probably didn't buy it. This was a guy that would bleed red, white, and blue. And now he's walking around with the Iron Sheik and General Mustafa, General Adnan. Mustafa was the Iron Sheik's name. Come on. If that happened today, forget it. Forget it. Can you imagine? It almost did. Like I said, Muhammad Hassan is the best example you could put. That's what would happen nowadays if you do some of the stuff that they did back then. As far as the NWA is concerned, their tag team division was much better. They had the Minnesota Wrecking Crew, Gene and Ole Anderson, as their champions for the majority of the year, bringing legit pro wrestling to the ring every time they stepped into it. And they would lose the titles later on that year, eventually to the fantastic team of Dusty Rhodes and Dirty Dick Murdoch. And now you want to come here and tell me 40 years later that the New Day is going to be the greatest tag team of all time. Why? That doesn't even make sense. Because it doesn't matter that you held it the longest last year, and it doesn't matter that they're planning on making them hold it 6-7 times within the next 2 years before these guys are done. And in their minds, that's going to proclaim them as the greatest tag team of all time. That is absolute bollocks. That is no way a factual thing. It doesn't matter how much you pad their numbers. Their performances are nothing compared to when you look back at the history of the tag team division. 1977, look at the 4 teams we just mentioned. Strongbow and White Wolf, Fuji and Tanaka, Dusty Rhodes, Dick Murdoch, Gene and Ole Anderson. You want to put the New Day above all 4 of those teams? Are you out of your mind? What are you drinking over there? It just doesn't make sense. You want to make them better than the Legion of Doom? You want to say that they're better than the Brainbusters or the Four Horsemen? Arn and Tully? You want to say that they're better than Demolition? Better than the Hart Foundation? Than the Rockers? The Rockers never even had tag team gold. And they're a better tag team than the New Day ever was. Just based on their resume alone. Their performances speak for themselves. That's asinine. It's not going to do it for me. And that's what's happening. We're getting too smart for it. There's been too much for us to look back on. And we're not going to accept this. Some of you might, because there are those fans out there that actually buy into all this crap. That's the fans that the WWE wants to fill the arenas with. The guys that want to cheer for Roman and John Cena and the New Day and all these people that Vince wants you guys to like. But a real wrestling fan knows better. And we want Braun Strowman. We want AJ Styles and Bobby Roode, Daniel Bryan, Samoa Joe. That's what we want. 40 years of professional wrestling, and I'm still asking myself, why do I watch this stuff? Sometimes I just don't understand it, even as a wrestling fan myself. Do I want to be annoyed? Do I like to be aggravated? I remember as a kid, I never really felt this way. And maybe it's just because you're a kid and you don't know any better. I remember the feeling of watching Hulk Hogan staring down Andre the Giant in the ring at WrestleMania 3. It gave me goosebumps. And I remember as a youngster feeling there is no way that my hero is going to overcome this giant. It's done. It's done for Hogan now. This is over. I could not believe my eyes when I seen him slam that man and then eventually get the 3 count. I was as shocked as Bobby the Brain Heenan, and although I was not as disappointed as he was, the same night we got to see Macho Man Randy Savage versus Ricky the Dragon Steamboat in what many consider the greatest WWF match of all time until WrestleMania 25 came along, which I'll never forget that one either. Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker is hands down, if you want to point to one WWF match that you could consider the greatest WWF match of all time, that is it. Shawn versus The Undertaker. The first one. The first time they went at it. It was none better than that match. The psychology and the timing and the pacing and the performance of that match, there will never be anything better. And I know Flair and Steamboat had many knockdown dragouts that were better than the Savage and Steamboat match. And maybe even better than what we got from Shawn and Taker. But there's no bigger stage than WrestleMania. There was no way to make those feel more special than what happened that night. It was absolutely the best match I have ever seen. Shawn Michaels is arguably considered by many to be the greatest of all time, as is Ric Flair. The arguments can continue. Everybody's got a personal flavor and a personal taste. My personal favorite Shawn Michaels memory is when I was at Madison Square Garden for Survivor Series and the first ever Elimination Chamber match when Shawn Michaels would shock the world and win the title during his comeback tour in 2002. Even more so than being at that match. Later on that night, when we left the arena, me and my former best friend, who is no longer part of my inner circle for reasons that will never be discussed on this channel, were fortunate enough to sneak our asses into the WWF New York restaurant in Times Square following the show. And it's actually pretty weird how it happened. There was security that was stopping people from getting in at this door on the left-hand side. And while this commotion was going on, we seen a few business-dressed types, these guys looking pretty sharp, dressed to kill, come out the door on the right. And as they did that, we kind of snuck past them in, did one of these, I'll pass you, you pass me type deals. And the commotion on the left allowed us to gain entry to a very exclusive party post-Survivor Series that was going on downstairs. Nobody was the wiser that we weren't supposed to be there. We made our way downstairs. We got to see Rey Mysterio drunk off his ass without his mask on, hanging out in the corner of the bar with Nydia and Rosie and Jamal from 3 Minute Warning, just totally having a great time. There was tons of food on the table, and he was wasted, absolutely wasted. Devon Dudley came walking past me, shook my hand, got to talk to him for a quick minute. I sat at the bar next to Josie Scott, the lead singer of the rock band Saliva, who is absolutely nothing anymore, but was very, very popular in the early 2000s. He, too, was absolutely drunk off his ass. He was trying to get this broad to let him put his tongue in her mouth. It was pretty amusing. He gave me a really shitty autograph on a napkin because he was fucking wasted, but I got to shoot the shit with him a little bit. We talked a little bit about rock music. He told me his favorite wrestler was Triple H, which was mine at the time, and then he proceeded to go and try to tongue bang this broad at the bar, which was pretty fun to watch. That very same night, we would have Taz come out and talk to everybody. We got to see, who else came out that night? Stephanie McMahon was there. Sonny was there. There was so many superstars there. We didn't really have free access to many of them unless they were drunk and walking around and just saying hi to the fans. It was a fucking great night. One of my favorite wrestling memories of all time. As is, most recently, my attendance at NXT TakeOver Brooklyn, which was that whole SummerSlam weekend this year. You could see coverage of it on this channel. It was just incredible, between House of Glory and then NXT, and then hanging out with the podcast community down at 205th, and I was hanging with LeBar and Solomonster and JD and Luigi and all these guys that were down at the bar. I couldn't have been happier. It was a great way to bring this 40th year to, not to a close, but to start my 40th year and bring my third decade. There you go. Bring my third decade to a close. It was fucking fantastic. What else can we say about the last 40 years of professional wrestling? We could only hope that it gets better. Right now, we're not on a good path, But as you can see, if you look back in history, it goes up and down. It's never a perfect run. And right now, we're on a little bit of a down. But it hurts nowadays, because when you look at the fact that they have the greatest roster that they've ever had in history, and they can't put on 5-star shows on a consistent basis, it's mind-boggling. It's absolutely confounding. I don't understand how it takes them to bring Vince McMahon back to even cause a buzz. We all were worried about what was going to happen when Vince showed up on the show. That was the biggest thing you can get. That's your big draw. Vince McMahon, a 72-year-old guy who's running the company. That's what moves the needle. I don't get it. You got Shinsuke Nakamura, AJ Styles, Kevin Owens, Bobby Roode, all on one show, and you need Vince McMahon to come out of the back. Conversely, on Raw, you got Brock Lesnar, Braun Strowman, Samoa Joe, Finn Balor, Seth Rollins, Dean Ambrose, and you can't get the ratings up? You can't get Raw to be awesome? You haven't done anything with the Intercontinental Championship. Everything that you have tried to do, you keep starting feuds and stopping it. You had The Miz tear down Enzo Amore for what? He's not going to be fighting Enzo for the Intercontinental title. That whole thing was pointless. We're going to go back to Jason Jordan? You're going to give it to Jeff Hardy? What are you going to do? They don't know what they're doing anymore. It makes you pine and want those old days back. It's come a long way. 40 years is a long time. We could talk about it, and we would be here for 40 hours. So we're just gonna wrap it up on that. Thank you guys for being with me today. I'm sorry I really didn't have any legit type news. Today we were just shooting the shit, man. It's my birthday. I wanted to talk to you guys about something, so I figured we'd talk about that. Had to get my new gob up on the camera as soon as possible. You know what I mean? I wanted to show you guys some of my gifts, and the rest of the stuff that I got will be coming on this channel as soon as we get some news to talk about. We got Monday Night Raw coming up. We got SmackDown, of course. Hopefully, they continue to improve and get better. I doubt that highly. Nothing will get better until Jinder Mahal is stripped of the World Heavyweight Championship, at least in my opinion. But we'll have to wait and see what goes on. We got No Mercy coming up soon as well. Hopefully that's a good show. I'm really looking forward to Brock versus Braun. The Monster versus the Beast. Should be something special if they don't ruin it like they always do. Thank you guys so much. That's going to do it. And we are out of here. My name is Nick Nightmare. This is Blue the Snowball Microphone. Thank you once again for joining us here on the Sledgehammer Wrestling Show for this very special birthday edition of the show. And we will see you next time right here on the Sledgehammer Wrestling Show. Have a good one.